Yo guys, what's going on? My name is HackingIsFreedom and welcome to the 14th episode of What Was Cut, a series where we take a look at what exactly was cut from our favorite games. Today we're going to be talking about Battle for Bikini Bottom. This was one of my all-time favorite games growing up, and I really enjoyed the SpongeBob movie game, which I'm going to be doing an episode on in the future as well. Anywho, let's go deep underwater and figure out what was cut.
I like bubbles.
We're going to start off with the cut animations, and it seems the developers had plans for the characters you interact with to randomly roam around the map, as we have a bunch of animations for various characters walking. We have unused walking animations for Mr. Krabs, Gary, Squidward, Larry, Bubble Buddy, Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Mermaid Man also has an unused running animation, Plankton's walking animation seems to be unfinished, and finally we have Miss Puff running from something as well. It's quite strange that all the main characters in this game are stationary. The only characters that seem to move around are the random NPC fish. I'm sure this was just changed for performance reasons, but this would have made the game look a lot more natural and lively. Miss Puff has two other animations as well. They both look like she's very nervous or afraid of something, and these are both labeled as idle animations. Sandy has an unused animation for her getting hit by the player. This can technically be seen in-game, but only in the Muscle Bob boss fight, which was also cut, but we'll get to that later in the video. This animation of Sandy doing push-ups was supposed to be seen in the level Patrick's Dream, which also got cut from the game. I go over this level as well later in the video. Besides his walking animation, Bubble Buddy has two others. These were meant to be played as idle animations. These may have been cut because Bubble Buddy is only seen a handful of times throughout the game, and it's mainly in the beginning. In an earlier build, Patrick originally had a headbutt attack, rather than his traditional Billy Bash. I will say the headbutt's hit detection is a little off, and it makes it much harder to hit enemies. This mime was supposed to be seen outside of the Krusty Krab's windows when clearing out the robots, but due to an oversight, you can't see him. Maybe that's for the best. What's up with his creepy mouth? Robo Patrick surprisingly has an idle animation. This cannot be seen under normal circumstances, as Robo Patrick is constantly in an attack cycle. Even using a moon jump cheat won't break this cycle. Robo SpongeBob also has an idle animation. Once again, this can't normally be seen because all of these bosses never go into an idle state. The Cut Muscle Bob boss also has some animations that went unused. These first four all happen to be for when he's taunting the player. And finally, these two are for when Muscle Bob is idle. The detail and work that went into this scrap boss fight is truly amazing. It makes me really wonder why the developer scrapped this in the first place. Next up, let's talk about the various cut textures, and there's quite a lot of them to talk about. This first group of textures were all seen in earlier builds, as they're all used as HUD elements. You can see a lot of these textures much better here, as this is the beta version of the menu. Everything was pretty much 2D, and apparently Patrick's lost socks were originally going to be lost anchors, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. Lost socks fits him much better. Fun fact though, that anchor icon was later reused in the SpongeBob movie game for Patrick's macho throw ability. This odd texture is labeled as a bubble meter, and I'm not really sure what the purpose of this was supposed to be, but if I had to guess, judging by the name, perhaps you needed to collect containers of bubble liquid in order to keep using your bubble powers, like the Bubble Bowl or the Cruise Bubble abilities. It's unknown what they may have been used for, but these two textures of a poorly drawn SpongeBob are still left over in the game's files. I believe these were used for an early version of the health system, before the underwear was introduced. For some reason, there's an unused texture of a crudely drawn flagpost hidden in a texture sheet for the pressure plate. The pressure plate was changed a bit too, as this texture here is from a beta build. It seems very placeholder-like, and you can actually see this in action here. This texture was supposed to be used in the intro cutscene when SpongeBob wakes up to find his house vandalized. When loading into Patrick's rock, this texture is loaded in the game's memory, and it relates to Patrick's bed, which is obviously never seen. The wooden part of this texture is however used for Patrick's ladder. Some of this texture sheet was used in the Merma layer for various pipes, however, the texture reading spotlight button is never used. You can also see an early version of the button texture attached to this sheet as well, for whatever reason. Speaking of the early button texture, here it is. This was ripped from a beta build, and it was not much different from the final game. In the Merma layer, the texture that was supposed to appear on the Merma layer computer screen has override misspelled. This is most likely why it doesn't actually appear in-game. For some reason, the final phase of RoboBob's boss fight loads a texture of SpongeBob himself with anchor arms. However, this texture is actually used for a part of RoboBob's eyes. The target icon for the Bubble Bash ability went through some interesting design changes. It started out as a basic looking X, then it moved on to a basic looking target, and then we obviously got the one we all know and love. It seems adding the Viking helmet was a late design choice. The HUD icon for the shiny objects in earlier builds was incredibly basic. Surprisingly though, this basic design was left in for a very long time, and it can be seen in numerous early gameplay videos and screenshots. Only a couple of months before release, it was changed to this, which is basically just a 2D version of what we have in the final game. It seems the developers were really unsure of what color to make the watermelon fruit Patrick can pick up. As you can see in this texture sheet, there's multiple colors. I like a lot of these other colors, to be honest. This texture here I believe was an early version of where you have to jump when sliding on the sand mountain levels. I could be wrong though, but the file is labeled as Tongueboard Test Sand. There's two versions of the sign texture for when the subtitles are on screen. Both of these can be seen in earlier builds and various screenshots. This temp texture was used for a placeholder version of the clam gates you see around various levels. Well, speaking of temp textures, this texture is found in the files for almost every level, and what's pretty strange is, this texture is assigned to a few boxes that seem to spawn somewhere in the level, meaning there's actually boxes or cubes with this texture loaded into various maps that spawn somewhere unknown and nobody has found them yet. I'm gonna guess in one map they spawn at the center point, which is at coordinate 000. This texture here I don't really know what the purpose was for, but it does have an unused model to go with it. The texture itself is labeled as Force Field Energy. This one is quite interesting. This texture apparently was used for the BizzBot, although I'm not really sure in what way. The texture is labeled as FXFOD Bizz Disco, so I'm not sure if that means there was a disco version of the BizzBot, or if the disco is referencing the disco floors featured in the Murmur layer. Or this could even be an early version of the BizzBot Laser Beam, as that changes from green to yellow to red, so maybe this is an early texture for that. The shiny objects themselves in beta builds were extremely basic, and these were the textures that they used. It's kinda strange to me that the developers decided to properly translate this temp texture, even though they knew it was going to be replaced in the future. This texture sheet here I thought was quite interesting. It seems to be the textures used for various particles, like this section here, which was used for the twinkle effect on shiny objects. Although the main thing we're talking about here is at the bottom. It seems the developers were planning on using some sort of snowflake effect, perhaps for the loading screens in Sand Mountain, or maybe these snowflakes became the design and shape of the shiny objects, as they kinda do look similar in shape. The text in the bottom left hand corner says unused, and I find it super cool when developers leave stuff like that in their work. This is also something I thought was pretty cool, although I'm not entirely sure where it was used in game. Please let me know in the comments if it is used somewhere, but when I was dumping the textures of the beta build, I came across this texture sheet. Now, this is obviously the texture used for the rubber ducky in SpongeBob's bathroom, but has any of this other stuff been seen or even used in the game? I'm pretty sure this realistic looking cell phone isn't seen anywhere in SpongeBob's house, and this thing in the corner looks like an Atari controller. The shoes I believe are a reference to the episode called Your Shoes Untied from Season 2.
Wouldn't you rather see them on my hands?
Okay.
However, they are miscolored. This pink thing on the other hand, I have no clue what this is. It kinda looks like a donut or one of those scrunchy things you use in the shower. Lastly, while it's not a texture that goes unused, but it's something I had to see, so now you guys have to as well. This is the texture sheet for SpongeBob when he's drying out, or basically suffocating in Sandy's tree dome. My god, this is creepy. Why did developers put so much detail behind his eyeballs? Well, what do textures get applied to? The models, of course, so let's talk about those, shall we? First up, we have this model of a mysterious perfume bottle. This may have been used somewhere in the Flying Dutchman's levels as a reference to the episode Shanghai, where SpongeBob and Patrick have to escape through the perfume department.
But the door is locked, and the only way out is through the perfume department.
Let's do it!
A fun little fact about that clip you may not know, the scene of the actual perfume department was filmed at a Macy's somewhere near Nickelodeon Studios. Literally until doing my research for this video, I had no idea that was a Macy's. I'm also not American, so I don't have any Macy's here. To me though, that section always looked like a Sears perfume department. This model here is of the Smelly Sundae from the episode Something Smells, and this was supposed to be used as a power-up, but it got cut. Here's some footage of it in action. It would basically increase your speed by a little and leave a stink trail behind your character, and this would last for 10 seconds. This model is a little strange. It's labeled as Top Fan Glow Purple, and I don't really know where this was supposed to be used. Perhaps this was a light for the top of the big fan you see in downtown Bikini Bottom? These two models were supposed to be featured in the Goo Lagoon levels, however they got replaced by other variants. The signs that display helpful tips used to have Gary depicted on them. This can be seen in early builds, screenshots, and even in the early Goo Lagoon level, which we talk about later. I personally don't know why they changed this. The signs look so much better with Gary on them. This model I find pretty interesting because it's so primitive looking. This model is labeled as a tree wall, so I'm guessing this was going to be used somewhere in the kelp forest at an earlier point in development. This is the temp box I was talking about earlier, the ones that spawn somewhere unknown in each map. So technically this model isn't unused, but it's very, very unlikely you'll see this in game. There's also some sort of temp platform model left in the game's code. By the color, I'm going to guess this was used as an early platform in jellyfish fields. Before the fruit that Patrick throws around was fully designed, it was originally a soccer ball. Here's a better look at it. The base of the fruit seemed to have a purplish berry or some sort of texture on it, while in the final game, this has nothing on it obviously. The shiny objects went through a few different design stages, with the earliest being this version here. All shiny objects were just basic shapes like squares, diamonds, or triangles. This one here is from a far later stage of development, but you can see they got much closer to the final design. Squidward's character model has his clarinet constantly affixed to his model. However, due to a coding oversight, it's never seen in-game. Here's what it would have looked like. The Sleepy Time robot used to have a big light bulb coming out of the top of his head. I don't know, all I can see is a mushroom cloud, like his mind is exploding. In early betas and screenshots, most of the robot's abilities use this pink texture for their effects. This model specifically is of the spotlight projector. These 6 models of onions in different stages were supposed to be used in Patrick's dream. With the level being cut, none of these appear in the final game. However, I do go over Patrick's dream later in the video, and I believe only the full onion is used there, making the other 5 completely unused. Before the clam was decided on, it used to be a shiny object donation box. An even earlier version of this box was used in early demos and can be seen here. It seems RoboPatrick originally also used to spit ice at you, as this model is of an ice shard. Although it seems like it was cut very early in development, as the model has no textures associated with it. In the kelp forest, it seems the developers wanted to use plants and vines for teleporting instead of the normal cardboard box. This would have looked so much better in my opinion, but I'm sure it was changed because it blended into the environment too much. If you're curious, all 3 of these models have kelp warper in their name. These, 2 suspicious looking rocks were supposed to be used somewhere in Sand Mountain levels. This sign was used for the entrance of Sand Mountain, and you might be saying, what are you, blind? Clearly that says exit. Well, here's where it was used. Perhaps this is why it was changed, as it didn't make much sense seeing an exit sign while entering a level. These 2 models, I'm not really sure where they were supposed to be used, but I feel like the fuse was going to be used somewhere inside of the Robobob boss. The push pin, on the other hand, I'm not really sure at all. It could have been used anywhere really, like in Shady Shoals or the police station. I'm sure you've seen these cabinets before, but these are sitting right outside of SpongeBob's kitchen. These were used in earlier builds, but when SpongeBob's kitchen got changed, they just forgot about them. Funnily enough, these were also forgotten about in the remaster, and they're still just sitting out SpongeBob's kitchen in that game as well. All of the tikis went through some hardcore design changes. Here's the original wooden tiki design. Here's 2 models of the lovey-dovey tiki, one with wings and one without. You can see in the final game the model has its texture incorrectly applied to it, so this is what it's supposed to look like. Finally, here's the Thunder Tiki, and there's even an earlier version that was originally blue. These 2 objects were supposed to be used somewhere in the Murma layer. The one on the left is labeled as B3 Synapse B-Spin Low, and the other is just labeled as Rocket Booster, which to me looks like the rocket booster you see under the platforms in the Robobob boss battle. There's an unused model of a worm that looks like Mr. Doodles, which is Mr. Krabs' pet worm from the episode As Seen on TV from Season 3. This worm actually has animations and can be spawned in-game at Shady Shoals, though all animations are broken. Thankfully, there's a mod created by Till that shows what this character was supposed to look like. Finally, as we all know, the backside of the taxi isn't fully modeled in-game. However, there does exist a fully modeled version. The texture isn't correctly mapped, but it's still strange that the developers chose a non-modeled version over the fully modeled one. I've been mentioning the Muscle Bob and Patrick's Dream level quite a lot, so let's finally get into the cut levels, yeah? First up, let's talk about the Muscle Bob boss fight. This was obviously cut really late in development, as the boss fight is almost fully complete, but it lacks an ending to the first phase. It seems the boss would have smashed the ground in order for the rocks to fall, so Patrick can pick them up and attack the boss. Once both arms are blown off, it's not known what would have happened after. It may have swapped into the second phase of the boss fight, or there may have been another stage to fight after destroying the arms. This boss battle was sadly removed in the remaster as well. In the files of the GameCube and Xbox versions of the game, there's 2 folders inside the files for Goo Lagoon. The first folder is called Working, while the other file is simply called New Folder. Both of these folders contain early data for Goo Lagoon, and you can access it simply by swapping out the files. The map is dated May 11th, 2003, while the final game's level is dated September 18th, 2003. This level is very unstable, and a lot of things are either missing or just don't work properly. Finally, we have the level I'm sure most of you know about. It's called Patrick's Dream, and it can be accessed by using this action replay code. This is what the level looks like normally. The smearing in the background is due to a missing skybox. However, here's what it looks like with a skybox. Much better on the eyes. There's not really much to this level, and the NPCs are all placed in a straight line, which were intended to be placed around the level at a later point. Although, thanks to Till, we can actually see what this level was supposed to look like if it was fully completed. Please keep in mind this is just his recreation of it. Nothing here is 100% accurate or official. This design was mainly taken from the concept art of Patrick's dream, which you can see here. And I just want to quickly mention Glove World, as it was mentioned in the early menu, but only its concept art is left over. You can see there was going to be a golden spatula at the top of the coaster. However, it's speculated that this was later adapted into the Goo Lagoon Pier. Next up, it's everything sound related. We've got some cut voice lines, music, and sound effects. Get ready! I think this is the most sounds I've ever covered in a video so far. First up are the voice lines, and we have quite a lot from various characters. So we'll start with Spongy first. I'm not going to talk through these because there's way too many and it would take way too long to get through all of these. So there will be text on screen explaining what each sound is. Unless I really need to explain something, then I'll just pop in.
I didn't know Squidward had a lamp. Living under a rock. Now that's the life. SpongeBob to mission control. The launch is a go. Wow, King Jellyfish, the grandest granddaddy jellyfish of them all, and he's after me. Wow, everyone looks like antfish from up here. I'm not afraid of heights. I am not afraid of heights. I am not afraid of heights. Boing, boing, boing.
This line was likely intended for defeating robots, however, it was later reused in the remaster for entering the Murma lair for the first time.
It's not just any sponge, it's Super Sponge, soaking up crime.
This line was also likely intended for defeating robots. However, this too was used in the remake for walking around downtown Bikini Bottom.
Bringing it around town.
These next three voice lines are all cut versions of when you collect the golden spatula. Rather than just laughing all the time, one of these three would have played.
Wow, really? For me? Oh, you shouldn't have. Victory screech! Oh! Have you ever seen a more perfect spatula of shiny golden goodness? Okay, that's creepy. I'll just sneak up on him. Gotta watch out for the boom. Now how to get this one open? Watch the tentacles! Ouch! A giant sandy robot! I'm doomed. He looked a lot bigger on TV. The bigger they are, the harder they hit. Oh! I'm being shanghaied! Oh, this is so creepy. As if the small version weren't enough.
Patrick is up next, and he has a little less than SpongeBob.
Ooh, wooden presents. That's pretty high up. I don't sneak very well. Uh-oh, this one goes boom. Hard as a rock. I like bubbles. Oh, that's the biggest, scariest jellyfish I've ever seen. That's the biggest Sandy I've ever seen, except when she was hibernating. Come on out and fight like a crustacean. Wow, I'm huger than normal today. Please don't Shanghai me, Mr. Dutchman. I don't think this is good. He's only big if you think he is.
This last one for Patrick was used as test dialogue while entering his rock. Only text remains, so I recreated it with AI.
You shanked my Jenga ship.
The funny thing about that quote is, it's a direct reference to the Homestar Runner cartoon, specifically in the episode called Where's the Cheat?
Oh no! You shanked my Jenga ship! I shanked your Jenga ship? We're playing Connect 4.
I'll be honest, I've never seen or heard about this cartoon prior to doing research. Next is Sandy, and most of her voice lines are for her spotting things.
Stop your staring at me. Way too much makeup. Cowardly little fellas. Like a Texas thunderstorm. Them's tough nuts to crack. Get along, little doggy. You're just a bag full of jelly. Well, don't that beat all?
Mr. Krabs is next, and he only has two voice lines that got cut. This first one was meant to be played when defeating King Jellyfish, then returning to Mr. Krabs as Patrick. This doesn't play due to a coding error, but this was fixed and used in the remaster.
Ahoy there, Patrick! Keep up the good work.
And the last one was supposed to be used when SpongeBob fails the extreme bungee challenge on the Sea Needle.
Don't give up on me now! You've got to keep trying, me boyo!
Mr. Krabs was also apparently going to sell you 10 golden spatulas in total. However, the 9th and 10th ones got cut. There's only text left over, but I used AI to recreate the voice lines. I used Clancy Brown, which is the actual voice actor of Mr. Krabs, so that's why it sounds completely different than the one in-game. Plus, you know, my voice to AI.
Your treasure chest's looking a bit light, boy. Do you think I've got bilge water on the brain? I ain't running a charity here. Come back when you've got 9,000 shiny objects to trade. You want to trade 9,000 shiny objects for a golden spatula. Your treasure chest's looking a bit light, boy. Do you think I've got bilge water on the brain? I ain't running a charity here. Come back when you've got 10,000 shiny objects to trade. So, do you want to trade 10,000 shiny objects for a golden spatula?
The realistic fish head surprisingly has a few cut voice lines. The first four are for when SpongeBob successfully bubble bowls into Robo Patrick.
Strike! 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 This boy must be smoking at the lanes.
All of these voice lines were later used in the remaster. And this last one was supposed to be played at the end of Robo Patrick's boss fight.
That's it! That's the match! SpongeBob is still champion!
Finally, we have Larry, and the only cut voice line he has is a response to you failing the Slidin' Texas-style task in Sandy's dream.
Good try! Keep up your speed, stay on the track, and you'll make it!
As a bonus, I want to add these Bubble Buddy voice lines, as I thought they were pretty funny. Only text remains for these lines, and they were obviously made only for a joke or by an angry or bored developer. Again, I use my voice to AI, but this one surprisingly sounds pretty good.
Welcome to my nightmare. Hi hench though, spongy freak. Well done, SpongeBob. Now die. What about get out of here? Didn't you understand? I said beat it. Thanks for leaving me alone. Repeat as needed.
As for sound effects, there's only a few that have been cut. The Monsoon robot originally had a unique death sound. This next sound is labeled as Pat Jump Land, and this was most likely a placeholder sound effect because this exact sound can also be found in Burnout 3, which is another game developed in the Renderware engine and another personal favorite of mine. This one is an early sound effect for SpongeBob's Bubble Bounce. Some sort of tree bashing sound that was later used in the SpongeBob movie game. This one is an alternative sound for when you hit one of the umbrellas in Goo Lagoon. And finally, these last 5 sounds, or tones, were supposed to be randomly played every 4 seconds in Squidward's dream. I'm pretty sure these were cut for being too obnoxious. Last up for the sound stuff is 3 cut music tracks. This first one is an alternative version of the Kelp Forest theme with a different intro and ending. This second one is cut background music to Industrial Park, which is Robo Patrick's level. And the last one is from Downtown Bikini Bottom. As we all know, the music just keeps looping. This version actually has an ending. As we come to the end of the video, it's time for the oddities I found throughout the game. The first oddity I'd like to show you is this weird button inside of Robobob's brain. It's called Brain Button 1 in the game's code. However, nothing can activate the button as there's no links or events associated with it. So whatever function it did have, it's completely removed now. Some sort of nozzle or spigot can be found in the second Murmelayer level at coordinate 000, which is the map's center point. This is obviously just a misplaced asset, as tons of these can be seen around the Murmelayer. For some reason, the Krusty Krab's kitchen is fully modeled, even though only a small piece can be seen. The Poseidon actually has a skybox, although with this fight taking place indoors, it's obviously never seen. This one I'm sure we all know about, but you can see Barnacle Boy's head pop out of the Murmelayer computer when attacking it. This is because Barnacle Boy is the model that you actually interact with when speaking to the computer. Usually when developers have an NPC without an actual model, they still need something for the camera to lock onto when speaking to the said NPC. So they either reuse a model, or they make a dummy model to point to for that interaction. Bubble Buddy was supposed to appear in SpongeBob's dream, although he wouldn't have added much. He was more of an ambient background character. The voice lines for this clip I recreated.
There's something odd about those people floating above their houses.
They're just dreaming in my dream. In fact, you yourself are just a tiny ingredient in the casserole of my dream.
If you say so.
In Sand Mountain, specifically in Guppy Mound, there's 4 misplaced shiny objects. This may be because the house was a little further up the path. Also in Guppy Mound, there's 3 flags placed just outside where you spawn. I'm sure these were just used for quick copy and pasting around the map. Surprisingly though, the orange flag back here has a unique animation. None of the other orange flags on the mountain have this property. Also on Sand Mountain, in the top of the lodge section, there's 2 tikis hidden behind the entrance to the 3rd hill. At the end of the kelp forest slide section, there's 2 random tikis out here. The funny thing is, I'm pretty sure neither one of these tikis are used in this section of the kelp forest. There's also a single tiki left under the water in Goo Lagoon near the giant sandcastle. However, you can easily tell how he got there, as just above where the tiki is placed, there's a gap in the other thunder tikis. So, it seems the developers just messed up the placement a little bit. The developers surprisingly left in a lot of debug triggers for bosses. This first one is for the Roboboss boss fight, and it's located directly above the player spawn point. You can actually reach this legitimately with a well-timed jump when Robobob slams the platform. There's another for the Flying Dutchman boss fight, and once again, this is located directly above the player spawn. You can reach this by using the cruise boost trick and some platforming. Prawn's boss fight also has a debug trigger, although it's much harder to get to. This one is located above the entrance to the level and cannot be reached without the use of cruise boost. Even with a moon jump cheat code, you can't reach this because it's outside of the level. And the only reason you can reach this with the cruise boost is because you're always moving faster than intended, so you can basically glitch right through the collision. And yes, I did learn cruise boost just for this short clip. Although it's not for a boss fight, the last debug trigger is underneath Miss Puff in the rock bottom level, and this was used for instantly completing the artwork task. The only way you can reach this trigger legitimately is by using a glitch called lag buffer, where you basically spam the menu button as fast as you can in order to create lag, and you eventually clip through the floor. This glitch can only be done on real hardware, as far as I know. In the area where you need to beat Larry's time on Sand Mountain, there's 10 checkpoints stored all in the same spot underneath the starting area. Some of these checkpoints are for when you actually fall off the side of the map and need to restart, but the others seemingly take you to random spots of the slide. The trick to activate these checkpoints legitimately is insane. It involves extremely precise button pushes and jumps, and it also requires cruise boost. There's also 10 checkpoints stored underneath the King Jellyfish boss fight, and I managed to get some footage of where these ones take you. This first one took me to near the end of the slide. The second time I did this took me way outside the map. And the last time I did this, I managed to find a soft lock checkpoint. And that's it, soft locked. Hans basically grabs you too fast to press any buttons, as well as trying to open the menu. Speaking of Hans, he's pretty annoying sometimes, isn't he? Have you ever wished you could just disable him entirely? Well, with this simple glitch, you can. Start by going to this rock beside the entrance of Jellyfish Fields, and wait for Hans to grab you. Once he does, mash the A or X button. You should hear the whistle effect for the cab. Now, do the exact same thing, and once Hans grabs you, don't do anything, just let him drag you into the level. Hans is now partially disabled. To disable him completely, just follow the path up to the bungee area and jump off while aiming for the golden spatula. You'll get the golden spatula and die at the same time. When you respawn, open up your menu and travel anywhere you'd like. Hans is now fully disabled. Please keep in mind though, you do need to have autosave enabled to do this glitch. One last thing about my man Hans. In earlier builds, he used to grab you from the top of the screen, rather than from the side. There's a sign floating inside of the lighthouse that explains a cut game mechanic where you would have gotten more air by bubble bouncing on trampolines. Strangely enough, there is only one trampoline that this mechanic works on, and it's in the Goo Lagoon Pier section. In the final stage of the Robobob boss fight, there's 3 untextured platforms that still have proper collision. I'm not sure if these are any different than the ones seen around Robobob's body, but considering that they still have proper collision, these were probably removed late in development. The Bubble Bounce and Bash abilities both had different models when being used in earlier builds. The Bubble Bash was just a simple helmet, kinda similar to the one seen in the episode I'm With Stupid, and the Bubble Bounce looked like loafers, rather than just big feet. There's a sign in the crowd of the Poseidon that's hidden underneath other textures. It simply says Whisk, which is a little strange. In the GameCube or Xbox release, if you have over 75,000 shiny objects and enter this button combination, you'll unlock a hidden cheat called Panhandle. When walking over or near any NPC, you'll immediately lose 500 shiny objects. It's a little broken with how and when it activates, but it is here. The whole taxi system seems like it was a late addition to the game, as earlier builds have no reference to the taxi at all. The taxi gates around each level are missing, and the fast travel mechanic wasn't here yet either. In earlier builds, the text for checkpoint that would display on the screen was originally green, and I don't know, I personally like the green a little bit more. The final oddities I'd like to talk about are the leftovers to Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. That game runs on the Renderware engine as well, but this video is only left over in the Xbox version of Battle for Bikini Bottom. And surprisingly, it's also an There's also text left over telling the player to insert the Scooby-Doo game disc, as well as the text for every single mission in Scooby-Doo. And that's all I have for SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. I know this one was a long one, and I truly appreciate it if you made it to the end. I noticed just before I went on my camping trip I hit 7,000 subscribers, and we're already almost to 8,000. You guys are truly awesome. A big thanks to Joshua Campo 7970 for suggesting this one. This game is just fantastic, and I love it so much. And I'm definitely going to be adding the SpongeBob SquarePants movie game sometime in the future, as I'm a huge fan of that game too. I know some of you may hate that game, as it got mixed reviews, but I enjoyed it as a kid. Anywho, if you have a suggestion for the next What Was Cut episode, please feel free to comment down below. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.